This week's video blog was inspired by the fact that I was asked to review a book called Hey, I'm Maisie and I'm Autistic, which is by Alison Hadley. It's a book about being a girl with autism. Now, there's been a growing understanding about girls with autism. Back when I first learned about autism, going back quite a long time now, it was thought mainly to be a boys' thing. And yet the very first speaker I heard on autism was a lady called Ros Blackburn, who was absolutely wonderful. And that was nearly 25 years ago. And she explained what it was like to be autistic. And one of the things I clearly remember was how she said she loves words. She does the talks because she loves trampolining. So the talks on autism are her way of being able to pay for her trampolining. And she talked very much about supporting people with autism, but not letting them do things that harm others, you know. So on a plane journey, for example, and I've heard her speak about 3 times now, and on a plane journey when all she really wanted to do was bang her head against the seat in front of her, which would not have been very good for the people sitting in front of her, she was given strategies that would soothe her so she wouldn't want to do that, you know, things like that. And I also remember very clearly her saying how at the end of the talk it was really important to her that whilst we would feel that we needed to clap, she would rather we didn't, because that would really freak her out, the sound of the clapping. Another brilliant lady speaking on autism is Robin Stewart. She still speaks on autism as well, and she has written books looking at girls' perspective and things like safety, how a girl might go along with things because they'll take things at face value and could put themselves in real danger. And really brilliant speakers. Alison Hadley's new book, Hey, I'm Maisie and I'm Autistic, it highlights various things about autism and about girls in autism. It stresses the fact that there isn't a one-size-fits-all. Oh, you're autistic, that means you like this, you don't like this, you do that, you don't do that. It's not like that. Every child, every adult, every person with autism is different. And whilst there are things that are common to a lot of girls with autism, not necessarily all girls with autism. People with autism will each be their individual self. It looks at the strengths of having autism and at the difficulties in having autism. But they're all part of a whole person. So one of the things it talks a lot about is masking, and this is something which is more typical of girls with autism than boys with autism, because boys with autism more often just display who they are, how they are, in whatever way they do, whereas girls will often try to mask it, try to hide it. They'll be trying to fit in, so they will put all this effort into coping at school and appearing normal, whatever that means, that when they get home they're absolutely exhausted. Also at times they will have meltdowns in schools, and that will then cause them more anxiety. There's the thing that really frustrates me is when people get angry with someone for having a meltdown. Now I know it can look like just very poor behaviour, blah blah blah, but actually it is causing distress. I've mentioned this before when talking about Kathy Hootman's books. She's got her new one on autism features more girls. It's not her old ones were more gender, sort of male gendered. Now they are they encompass both genders. Her new book's just coming out, and her All Cats Have Autism, something like that. That looks again at that meltdown, that whole thing of the frustration, and that masking is really important. So this particular book, Alison Hadley's book, Hey, I'm Maisie and I'm Autistic, it, as well as highlighting strengths, difficulties, the masking, it gives tips to support throughout. So it will highlight that, say for example, as you know, part of my autism I can easily become distracted, and then it will give tips to how you might support that. It looks at overload, how you might switch off when there's just too much coming at you, and a coping mechanism can just be to shut down and just look out the window or something. So you appear to just simply be daydreaming, but it's actually a coping mechanism. She talks about the changes, how changes can really, really impact on somebody with autism. How it's not that you can't cope with change, but you need advance notice of that change in order to be able to cope with change. So if you're going to have a substitute teacher that day, then if somebody can say to you in advance, look, your normal teacher's away today, you're going to be having this teacher, you know, and then give that child a chance to just come to terms with that before the new teacher just comes in. I was once called to go back to a school where I had taught, a moderate learning difficulties school, because there was a new teacher starting first day of term after the Christmas holidays, new teacher starting, Ofsted coming in. And the school just felt that there was one child in particular who wouldn't cope with that many changes on the first day back. So I was asked to come in to just sit with him in class, just so that he could keep calm. And I explained to the teacher, look, please don't ask this child anything today, just let him just sit, because he's having to take in all this new stuff. The teacher felt the pressure of Ofsted and then said to this child, just ask them the question. I can't remember what the question was. And that child just threw everything up in the air, and it was like, slam, 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 storm out. All the things were in place, so it wasn't a problem because the child had a safe place to go. I went and just notified the head teacher, who went and sat with him, and it was all sorted. But it was just one change too many. And the simple strategy of not talking to him directly would have made a huge difference. Going back to the distractions thing, there was a child I taught with autism. This was a boy with autism. And he just didn't seem to be focused that lesson. He was normally really good. And it turned out I'd been putting these lines on the board, and there was 1 pixel out. And all he could focus on for the whole lesson was this 1 pixel out. So he couldn't learn that lesson. I learned a lesson. I learned to make sure things aren't 1 pixel out, in future. This book by Alison Handley, also talks about sensory issues. You know how, I don't know if you're like that, but if I get a label, and all my clothes, you can see no label in the back. Born anxious, brilliant. Their clothing, no labels. I can't cope with labels in my clothes. It's an irritant, and it will just sort of be like that all day. It just distract me. I'll end up cutting it out even while I'm wearing it. And that's just mild. So imagine what it must be like for somebody who's autistic, and it could be that the slightest buzzing of the light is like a huge noise filling their mind. It could be, I know one amazing young lady who's a brilliant artist, but she can't stand the feel of paper against her skin, so she wears a fingerless glove so that her hand doesn't rub against the paper. So there's simple little strategies you can do if you know what the issue is, and if you appreciate how big an issue it is for somebody with autism or sensory difficulties. Other special needs can have the same thing with sensory things. Born Anxious tweeted this week about how nature can be calming. She's lucky enough to live near a beach, and she takes her son on his walks at the moment. Obviously they were restricted. Luckily that restriction has been lifted for people with certain special needs, certainly autism. That going out and being with nature can be a real calming factor. The school where I last taught, we had like a forest school activity, and that was really helpful for any children, most children with special needs, but especially those with things like autism. So I'm recommending that book. I think it's very good. Hey, I'm Maisie and I'm autistic. As always, I recommend Kathy Hoopman's books. I think they're brilliant. If you get a chance to hear a speaker like Robin Stewart or Ros Blackburn, they are amazing, and they help you to understand what it's like. But especially with Robin Stewart, you really get that girl's perspective, like this new book, that female perspective. And that's particularly important because it's new in our understanding. Years ago, autism, a boy's thing. Not so. Autism, anyone can have autism. And it's important that we understand that especially because girls with autism, it can be a hidden disability because people still aren't expecting it from girls, and therefore they're not necessarily as open. And that masking at school could mean that if we don't listen to the pupil voice and the parent voice, we could miss that child, because that child's behaviour at home could be totally different from that child's behaviour at school. So it's really important that we listen, we hear, and we see these hidden disabilities. Thank you.